we are building about 10 lakh startups a year, how many of them actually become unicorns, how many of them sustain as unicorn is something which we need to really look at.
I think the total number of startups that actually end up going to Series A is about 13%.
Are we building to last or are we building to get lost? Narrated from India, it should have become a global startup and it should have become a pioneer in a tech platform. Unfortunately, it got collapsed. Welcome to the Pitch Fit. My name is Vijay Kumar Enara. We are going to talk about startups and the impact of the startups in the society. This is Karthik, Asia Pac Director of GitHub. We are going to discuss more about startups to understand how the startups actually impact common man and what values we add to the society. Hi, sir, Karthik.
I think before we start, we should make sure people understand why I'm here talking about startups. I think half the people in the audience will be, why is a GitHub corporate honcho guy talking about startups and what qualifications does it have?
So that's what is important, to give a brief about why. I will just add a forward so Karthik can continue about it. So we have been working with the community here in Coimbatore with a lot of startups trying to build the ecosystem, trying to contribute in terms of technology, in terms of business strategy, in terms of marketing, in terms of scaling the startups, and so many other challenges which the startup ecosystem and the startups themselves had. So that's how myself and Karthik got introduced almost 10 years ago. Yeah. So that's how we started. When we started doing so many things, and eventually all these opportunities took Karthik to GitHub, and probably Karthik can take over from here.
Yeah, so I think I've always been passionate about startups, right? I think I met Vijay sir somewhere in college, if I'm not wrong. Sometime I was in college, and I've been running startups, I think, from very early on in my life, in my own small, insignificant ways. I think I've been way more successful in corporate life than I've ever been in my startup life. which is ironic for me to be sitting on a startup show and having a conversation. But I have a lot of learnings that I can tell all of you about, stuff that probably I'm in a very unique position to have an answer to, that I think is what will go. I think what's happened in the past is that as I've sort of progressed in my career and I've changed priorities into sort of doing different things, I've realized that my roots are still in the startup game. So I try to be as involved as I can in the community, especially in Coimbatore. I play an active role with the Native Angel Networks, which is a strong investment angel network that I participate in. And wherever I can, we do try to help and mentor all of our startups through GitHub startup programs that I'm very actively part of, working with bunch of VCs and all that. So very excited to be here. But yes, that's the reason why I'm here having this conversation. So maybe I have a little bit of a qualification to talk about this, but I'll try to give a more global view for all of you, because you might not have had the chance to hear from someone like me. I think that gives a unique and fresh perspective of sorts.
The reason why we had to go for this talk is primarily to understand where we are moving towards. I mean, if we are building about 10 lakh startups a year, how many of them actually become unicorns, how many of them sustain as unicorn is something which we need to really look at. Are we building to last or are we building to get lost? That's the question which we need to ask and find out how we can progress together as a community, as a startup community basically. And that's what we wanted to understand through this Pitch Fit.
I think one of the recent studies I read about, I think this was one of the numbers from Y Combinator or something, I guess. I think total number of startups that actually end up going to Series A is about 13%. Which is shocking.
From my experience, 30% is still
quite optimistic. But that's what I think it was Y Combinator that said those numbers. I do apologize if I'm wrong, but I think the shocking fact that the survival rate of startups is so low is the reason for which we need to sort of look at this more actively and sort of driving more change in the ecosystem. So yeah, totally on board. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think me and Vijay were talking about this edtech platform that I think we don't need to tell the name about it. It would be nice to them. That was something that was built out of really cool intentions, right? Someone sitting, I think, in a village somewhere could study. And
absolutely, it's a beautiful opportunity and a great story to be narrated from India. It should have become a global startup and it should have become a pioneer in a tech platform. Unfortunately, it got collapsed. Let's not get into the details of why, because it doesn't matter now. But still, the founder's responsibility and an investor's responsibility is much beyond the money and the technology. Much more responsibility should be carefully crafted towards the society and the consumers, and also for the future opportunity in that particular industry. So all that is getting depleted and it is being put into a question mark when you don't do certain things in the right way. So that's another example, and one other top company which actually lost its financial arm primarily because of regulatory issues is another challenge which we saw. It was a disaster. So most of the experience which has been built to the customers got lost because of might be bureaucracy, might be non-compliance.
I think back in 2016, I want to say, right? So I think there was this initial momentum where we started calling it founder passion, which is what I think we just started. For those of you that know, I played a small insignificant role in founder passion as well in the very beginning of it. I think we should tell you a little bit about what founder passion aimed to do.
Yeah. So basically, 4 of us went to Bangalore just to find because we couldn't sit here and work for a long period of time, so we had to break from the monotonous lifestyle.
Also, the quality of beer in Coimbatore is quite bad.
Yeah, so we had to take the help of Airbnb, find out a place somewhere in Bangalore, got settled down in an Airbnb accommodation, and then we had to sit down and discuss. After 2 days of discussion, we just found that we are ready to start. I had an opportunity to work with Chiron Startup Business Accelerator based out of Bangalore, which was the first private accelerator in India. And a lot of learning happened after that. We were instrumental in screening all the NASSCOM 10,000 startups initiative applications for driving the startup acceleration program across Bangalore. And the Diamond City Startup Incubation Facility was inaugurated during the same time. And we actually shortlisted a lot of applications for that through NASSCOM 10,000 startups. And it was a quite different environment back then. And since 2014, a lot of things changed in the startup ecosystem, and exponential new investors jumped in, and there was a huge opportunity for building native startups. And the idea of Founder Passion Foundation started from there, trying to build Indianized startup ecosystem. We started working with agriculture sustainability startups, and we even did a major funding event called Agri Invest, so where agriculture startups across the country participated. Unfortunately, we couldn't complete the funding process because of COVID. And Founder Passion Foundation predominantly started with an idea saying, we need to support not just the entrepreneurs and the initial struggle of the entrepreneurs, but also build an ecosystem which can actually help them to build the necessary workforce and required skill set for the workforce to enable the whole entrepreneurship ecosystem. So it was more of a holistic support system to be built for the startup ecosystem. So that's how we started. The 2 days of discussion just went to find a name for the startup accelerator which we wanted to build. The reason we want to build a startup accelerator based out of Coimbatore is, again, the nativity bug got us, and we want to do something back to Coimbatore, because Coimbatore by itself is the first angel invested city. Lakshmi Mills is the one company which got angel invested almost 120 years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's the first, for your information.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was the first angel invested company in Coimbatore. But I think we didn't really progress from there, somewhere in the ideology. The glory of Coimbatore is never lost. There are a lot of technocrats here. We could still do business. So I still find a lot of companies without even a proper name board, but they are doing a very excellent business with real good technology in place. The challenge here is entrepreneurs are excellent. There is a beautiful work environment. There is a beautiful culture which exists here for entrepreneurship. But the migration towards the newer platforms and the newer technologies is only limited to a few handful of people. It has to spread. That's the primary reason why we started Founder Passion Foundation. Predominantly, we didn't want to build much of tech startups there. We're focusing more on agri-tech, sustainability, and defense startups. Unfortunately, we did an event for agri-tech startups and we landed up in COVID, and Founder Passion is still in the back burner now.
I think this is the start of a lot of things coming back to it again. So I'm really hopeful that Founder Passion can sort of get started again from scratch.
I do hope so.
I love that name because I think it closely ties to the story that you're talking about. I think a lot of what founders intend to do is born out of the passion for solving a certain problem. But what ends up happening is that in the mix of trying to generate revenue and satisfy investors, I think purpose sort of gets lost at some point, which begs the question, right? So, what is a startup? I think that's $1 million question. I think Vijay probably is a good person to answer this because again, I don't know if you about the time when Vijay worked at Chiron as an example, but if I were to ask you a succinct question. I have my own answer to this, but if I were to ask you a question, what is a startup? What would you say is it?
Startup is an exponentially scalable company which also has innovation.
I think startup is anything that solves a problem that can make money out of it as well.
Absolutely. See, one thing which most of the startups fail is primarily because they don't actually focus on money making from day one. Okay, so gone the days where you still can actually evolve and revolve around the business model and say that, okay, if I scale, I'll get the money. All those days are gone. You just need to make money from day one. So until otherwise we build startups which actually makes money from day one, it's never going to work. That might be a US model which could work in US, not in India.
I think the issue started also to become the fact that I think if you look at most of the startups that have gained success in India today, I think we'll take the example of the unicorns that have already been made as an example. I think none of them set out to become a startup. That's the one thing that's common across if you actually look at it, right? I think all of them wanted to basically build a very strong platform first more than anything else. They wanted to solve a problem that they had identified existed. I think that's sort of where they all started and sort of went down the line. And eventually when they went for solving the problem, I think they end up figuring out that, hey, there's a problem, there's a revenue opportunity that is attached to that problem. If I solve the problem, then there are things that come around that problem that we can then end up solving. And slowly you find incremental revenue streams to then add to the problems or something. So I think the issue is that now what I notice with a lot of younger entrepreneurs that want to come into the ecosystem, when I have conversations with students, is that I think they start talking about investments and raising investment first because they want to de-risk themselves. But the irony is that if you're doing a startup, you cannot de-risk yourself. If there's one lesson I can
absolutely at risk all the time, and you're also putting all the people who are involved with you at risk.
There's no escaping risk in a startup, which is ironic that you will not be able to risk it being there. So what I end up having a conversation with others, I end up telling them that, hey, if you have an existing revenue stream, for example, like you have a job or you have a freelance thing that you're already running, continue doing that. But figure out a problem that you are then able to go and solve, right? So, which is why I think me and Vijay always have this wide conversation around us where we keep saying that, hey, is an SME not a startup? This is a contention one that both of us end up picking.
SME can be a startup. It is not just the innovation which enables us a startup. It is definitely the business opportunity. If it is really exponentially scalable, then it could be a startup. Otherwise, it's definitely not a startup. It becomes an MSP.